What does it take to go from social worker to consultant to founder of your own leadership development company coaching top executives? For Winnie Da Silva, it took one maverick move after another. But more than that, it took courage, creativity, and a belief that the rules were meant to be rewritten. In this episode of Making Maverick Moves, we sit down with Winnie to talk about confidence, alter egos, the neuroscience of visualization, and why you don't have to check every box to lead like a boss. If you're holding back or waiting for permission, this one's for you. My name is Gina Osborn, and I'm an Army veteran. I spent 6 years during the end of the Cold War as a counterintelligence agent. I was appointed as an FBI agent, and during my 22-year career, worked everything from Asian organized crime to terrorism. I became the assistant special agent in charge of cyber and computer forensics. And then I came out of retirement and spent 2 years as the safety and security officer at LA Metro. Now I'm here to help you make your Maverick move. Welcome to the show, Winnie.
Thank you, Gina. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. So, Winnie, how do you go from being a social worker to a leadership expert?
Yeah, it's kind of like a big jump, right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting because I always thought I wanted to be a social worker, undergrad and graduate degree in social work. And I was literally working with crack kids in the South Bronx who were living with their grandparents because their parents were in jail, to working at Arthur Andersen Business Consulting as a change management consultant. So I tried it out. Didn't work. And then I basically went and was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. You know, I was just talking to people, doing the informational interviews, you know, like you should do when you're in your 20s. You don't know what to do with your life, you know? And I just so happened to talk to a recruiter because I thought, I want to be a recruiter, right? And she was like, I have the perfect job for you, which is why you should always talk to people and just say, you know, I'm interested in this, or I think I'm good at that, because you never know what people are going to come up with. Mm-hmm. And so I landed a job at Arthur Andersen Business Consulting as their training coordinator, went from training coordinator to training director to consultant to manager.
Wow.
And that was within 5 years. And then Arthur Andersen died because of Enron, and then went to work for one of our clients as their head of learning development. We worked with the CEO, and so that was now my new kind of boss's boss. Was there and then had a baby, and I was like, I'm traveling, I'm working, I'm doing a ton of stuff, and I don't like it. And so I did a bunch of interviews because I thought, you know, let me reach out, let me see what's out there. And I had 2 job offers. I had a job, and I literally quit my job, turned down the 2 job offers, and I jumped off the cliff.
Wow. And that was your Maverick move.
That was my Maverick move.
Starting your own company 20 years ago.
20 years ago in October.
That
I know.
is insane.
I know. It's exciting.
So I have so many questions relating to that. But the first one that I have is, what did you learn as a social worker that applies to CEOs?
Yeah.
I mean, like the leadership lessons that you learned in that situation. Were there any that you know really help you become as good as you are?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I loved about social work actually is what you learn is that the person is totally influenced not only by where they came from, like their personality, their genetics, but like their family, you know, their neighbors, their community, you know, what resources they're nearby, what resources they're not nearby. And so I always think about, you know, executives when I'm working with them, like who's in your community, like what's influencing you and who do you want to influence, right? Because one of the things that I work with executives all the time is thinking through their senior stakeholders and how to influence and build relationships with your senior stakeholders. And when you think about social work and you think about wanting to grow and develop and learn and move on and kind of maybe get out of the situation you're in, you think about what's around me and where can I leverage, what can I use, you know, what relationships and what knowledge do I have right here in front of me that I can use. So anyway, that's one thing that I really took away from being a social worker.
Wow. So you dove off the cliff, you said.
Yes.
Jumped off the cliff.
Yep.
So how did you feel that you could do it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, because that is a huge thing to go from, okay, well, I am going to give expert leadership advice to the people who are the top of the pile.
Yeah.
So how did that go for you, and how did you continue moving forward? I mean, it must have been scary.
Yeah, it's interesting because I jumped off the cliff and I didn't have any work. It just so happened that the place that I was working, I had just developed a leadership development program in partnership with Columbia Business School. And took a long time to develop it, launched it. I think we were in the middle of our second program, and I left and they hired me to do it.
Wow.
So they hired me back. So that was my first client. And then I worked with them for the next 8 years or something, running that very program that I created.
Yeah.
So, it's funny because, as a maverick, you don't even necessarily know where things are going to go unless you just jump off the cliff. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't have planned out really any part of my career.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just go and you try and you take action, and then you see where it leads you, and you make choices along the way, of course, right? But that was like a really, big part of that is just kind of going and doing it. And I think I was telling you, in another conversation that we've had, is that, I just kind of decided when I left that I wanted to work with leaders. I wanted to do leadership development. And so I just decided to put that in my title. Like, I got to make my own title because, I was running my own business.
Yeah.
And so I was like, leadership expert, that's going to be my title. That's what I'm going to do, now. And, you asked about just that uncertainty, right? And kind of jumping into that business. And in my latest podcast, I was just talking about immigrant entrepreneurs, and my husband and his whole family who are out here in California. They're all entrepreneurs, like all of them. And so when I left, my husband was so supportive. And I really feel like I couldn't have done it without him, just because he for him, it was normal. You know what I mean? Like, being an entrepreneur and starting your own business, it's like, yeah, this is what you should do.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me and my family, that's not what, that wasn't done, and not to say that they were against it, but anyway, I think for him kind of knowing this is something that's possible really made a difference for me.
Yeah. Well, I've known you for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
I think I may have been one of your first podcast
You
guests.
were, season 1, I know.
So I when looking at you, not a lot of people are willing to jump off a cliff.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
I remember when I went to retire from the FBI, government service, I wanted to get into creative ventures, and I saw this picture of a little girl wearing a tutu, and she's leaping off this cliff, but she wasn't falling. And of course, it's just a picture, but I thought to myself, you know what? I could do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, people get so intimidated by that leap.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
That's right.
So
That's right.
how did you get through that?
It's interesting because a lot of people would say to me, I had an 18-month-old girl when I did it. I had a second child right when I was about to do a program for one of my clients, and I was like, I'm pregnant, but I'm bringing her, and I literally brought her. She was, I think, 3 weeks old. I brought my whole family along with her. I brought her to the bar. The CFO was holding her. It was just like, just do it,
Right.
But I think, a lot of people would say, oh, I wish I had your job. I wish I did. And I'm like thinking, no, you don't, because I know that you would hate it. Because there's just too much uncertainty. There's too much ambiguity, and not everyone can handle that, and it can be high stress. And I think, I don't know, I feel like I'm just maybe really optimistic. And I just love what I do. I really love it. And I feel like in fact, Kelly and I were just talking about this, I feel like what I do is really about just helping people. It goes back to social work. And so for me, when I'm quote unquote selling I'm not really selling. I'm just like, what's your problem? How can I help you? I want to help you and I love it. And to me, that's just what leads the way.
Right. Right. You told me that you created an alter ego.
Yes.
In the very early days when you weren't sure if you could do it.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah. So, going from the South Bronx, being a social worker, to the boarding room of a CEO in Chicago was it was a big jump. And, I did a lot of acting in high school and some in college. And so I just took, kind of literally grabbed a page from that playbook And what I did is I just kind of imagined myself as Winnie the Consultant. And so that didn't put a lot of pressure on me having to be that person, if that makes sense. Like I could just be that role. I could play the role.
Right.
And that was something I could do even if I didn't feel like I had everything to back it up yet, right? So I would just kind of imagine like I would literally just picture the whole thing. Like I'm Winnie the Consultant. I'm walking into this boardroom. Where is the CEO sitting? Where am I going to sit? What am I wearing? How am I going to walk in? What am I going to say? You know, and thinking about the meeting and just kind of playing the whole, like visualizing kind of the whole thing in my head. And then I would do it. And what's interesting is I didn't know this at the time, later on learned that neuroscience actually tells us that when we do visualizations like that and we kind of create that alter ego and imagine kind of going through the steps, that it kind of tricks our brain into thinking that we've already done it.
Wow.
So when we actually do it for the first time, it feels like we're doing it for the second or third time.
Yeah.
So we're more relaxed.
Yeah.
You know, it feels familiar.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. And Beyonce, it works for her. She has her alter ego that she goes out when she's
For performance.
on stage. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So it definitely works.
Yeah.
You know, you and I, we've talked about the glass ceiling.
Yes.
We've talked about imposter syndrome. Do you believe in that? I mean, let's talk.
Okay.
Let's talk about that because,
Yeah.
you know, I never grew up thinking or even knowing about whatever this glass ceiling is. And it wasn't until I was in the Army painting the first sergeant's office where someone brought up the glass ceiling. I'm like, what are you talking about? So none of those things have ever really been in my universe, only because I think if they were, all it would do is slow me down.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I feel like, you know, who we are in our stories and how we grew up and like how we envision ourselves and envision the world really have a big impact on what that is. And I would even say, I'd even back up and say, I think there's a big difference between imposter syndrome and like a learning curve that we might have to like swing and go through when we're doing something new. And I personally think that sometimes people mix up the two. You know, like we're not necessarily in imposter syndrome when we've taken on a new role that we've never done before and we have to figure it out. And some people freak out and we're like, I have imposter syndrome because I don't know what to do. I'm like, you don't have imposter syndrome. You've never done it before.
Right.
You don't know what you're doing. You have to learn it, right? Which I think is very different, right?
Yeah.
But I'm afraid I'm probably more like you, Gina. Like I just don't have that kind of fear factor, or I just don't think about it. And I guess I default to action. You know, I just like to do and then see. But I also really like to learn. You know, for me, like learning is a big driver. So it's like, I actually thrive when I dive into something that I've never done before and I just do it. And I think you're the same way.
Yeah. But I put myself in a position where whatever is going on over here doesn't apply to me. Because I'm going to do it my way, how I want to do it. I'm going to be successful doing it. So all of these things saying that I can't do it, that doesn't apply to me. And I think that is what I don't get slowed down because I don't invite that to be part of my life. I don't have to create, you know, a strategy to get around all that because it doesn't apply to me.
Yeah. You know, I almost feel like I'm really trying to think about this, like what has gone down since like now, but I almost feel like I haven't even thought about it. Like I haven't even given it, like I'm literally just like, what do I want to do? And then I go do it. And that's it, you know, and then I kind of look for like, how do I do it? So I'm not really even paying attention to, you know, what people might or might not be saying around what you can or can't do. That doesn't mean it's not there, right? Because there's always things that are in our heads that we don't always have access to all the time, you know, that might be driving us. So, you know, there's certainly that. But I don't know. I feel like I'm just like so focused on this thing that I want to do that it's like, how do I just get there? You know?
Right. So, but there are stories that we have in our head. And like, for example, the first time I ever did public speaking when I was in the Army, awful, terrible.
Which is so hard to imagine.
Panic attack.
Like, I can't even believe it.
It was awful. And in my mind, I told myself that people don't want to hear what I have to say. That was the story that I would tell myself every time I had to go up and do public speaking.
So you were tripping yourself before you even got there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But I think, those stories, I want to talk to you because you are the expert.
Yeah.
How do we adjust those stories in our head? Because for me, I went through my entire FBI career avoiding public speaking, and it wasn't until I retired that I started to do it. And
Yeah.
have I mastered it? I don't know. Probably not. However, I had to get over the
You're
stories.
a long way from where you were.
Exactly. The stories that I had told myself. So
Yeah.
tell us
Yeah.
what is the deal with these stories that we keep telling ourselves?
Yeah.
And how does it help us and how does it hurt us?
So what's interesting about this idea is that many times I don't even think we're aware of that there's even a story. So I think where it actually starts is that we're getting we're doing something or we're getting results that we don't like. And we're thinking, how can I get this to be different? Like, how can I get to the point where my boss will listen to me? And I really want him to take my ideas seriously. And so I keep working on my ideas. And I keep thinking, like, if I just had a better idea. But in the meantime, there's maybe a story that's getting in the way of you and your behavior and your results. So what I always kind of tell people is don't get stuck on the results. Let's kind of like go downstream and look at what are potentially some stories that are kind of in your head, like you were just describing,
Right.
that are getting in the way of and kind of driving your behavior.
Right.
And that behavior is then getting you these results that you're not happy with, right?
Right.
I'm telling you right now, it's really hard work to both be aware of those stories. And then once you've conquered that, which is hard, it's possible, then what you want to do is you want to change those stories. You want to change what those stories are and kind of create a new narrative. And then you kind of really have to go with that narrative, you know what I mean? And try it out, maybe with a persona, right? You don't have to like, oh, am I believing like a story that's not true? No, try out something, right? See where that behavior and the results lead to, and then maybe do some experimenting, tweaking, right? But kind of creating that, understanding what that story is and creating a new narrative, it's not easy, but it really gets to the root of the issue.
Right. And whenever I mentor people and I listen and they start talking about they.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yes.
So that's when I know there's a story
Yes.
involved, is whenever
Very
they
smart.
say, well, every time this or they say that, I'm like, who's they?
Yeah.
And whenever you ask that question and then it stops people in their tracks and they've got to think, well, wait a minute, who is they? Who are they?
And then they're thinking of like one person.
Exactly.
Potentially, right?
From 20 years ago.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right.
That's living on. Yeah. No, and you bring up a good point because when I use this model, I talk about the stories that you tell yourself about you, the stories you tell yourself about other people, like that. You also tell yourself stories about the way things are.
Right.
So like if you're at a company and you're like, well, that's just the culture, right? It's a toxic culture, so I'm not going to be able to change it. Or it's a toxic culture that people interrupt each other all the time. And, that's just the way it is, so I'm going to do it too. And so that can be a story too. So it's those three aspects of a story, what you tell about yourself, others, and the way things are.
Right. So, okay, so let's walk through a story that I may be telling myself.
Okay.
And help me
Good.
stop that.
Okay,
right?
good. I love it. Good. Let's
Okay.
do it.
So I had a conversation with a complete badass boss, right?
Okay.
And she was telling me, every time I go into this room, I have to be softer. I have to change the way I talk to people, or else they're going to think I'm too aggressive.
Okay.
Okay. So say because that was my story. I always felt as being a 6 foot tall woman in a male-dominated field, I, in the beginning, felt that I had to soften up because I didn't want to intimidate all of the men that I worked with. So how do I change that story thinking that there's something wrong with me?
Yeah.
Because they're treating me in a certain way, or maybe in my mind, I think that they think I'm a certain way.
Yeah.
So how do we fix that story in my head?
Well, the first question that I would kind of ask someone like in that situation or other situations is, kind of what we were just saying, where's the kernel? Like there might be someone, I'm not going to say this is true for you, but there might be that like even, your mother said to you, tone it down, right? Stop being so loud. Right? Or something that kind of like, that was a kernel,
right,
that started it. And then maybe people along the way, like a boss or a colleague, even just like a look, right? Or something like that. So usually just like lies,
Yeah.
there's usually a kernel of truth.
Right.
Right, which is why it makes it so hard to overturn
Right.
and get to the truth. So, that can be helpful sometimes for people to kind of like reflect and think about, where did that story come from?
Right.
Right? Because it might not have come from nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it doesn't, right? Sometimes we just sort of develop it and there's something more topical, but sometimes there's something deeper. So I think that would be like a good place to start, is like, where's the kernel? Do you have any like insights into where that might have come from? And then to kind of unwrap some of that.
Right. It's interesting as we talk about it. I remember I was in high school or something, maybe like right out of high school, and we went to some party at UC San Diego, and I remember some guy who I had just met saying that I was too loud. I just remember that.
Yeah.
And I think that probably, you need to be softer, you need to be this, you need to be that. And so it's so funny that something like that, and I remember feeling bad because, am I too loud? Am I this or I that? And so I think that is probably what
one of those kernels.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, again, you're big, you're beautiful, you've got the blonde hair. It's like, people might have then given you additional like subliminal messages almost, and you were just ripe to pick them up.
Yeah, for sure.
Instead of just feeling like, this is just me.
Right.
This is just me. I'm comfortable in my own skin.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But you're right. I think that might have been the kernel. So then the question is, what narrative do you rewrite?
Yeah.
So for you, because you've already rewritten it, do you feel like that there's a narrative for you that you have used now to like rewrite that initial kind of narrative that was negative?
Well, I think the better I got at my job, the less it mattered to me.
Oh, interesting. So competency.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So, but can you tell, like, even just like reflecting back, what narrative is that? Like, if you could put that into like a couple of sentences, what's the narrative?
The bad story or the good story?
No, the good one.
The good story?
Yeah.
Is that it goes back to what my mom would tell me when I was a little girl. It's none of your business what other people think of you.
Okay.
So I think I would just take that, and whenever I would have a conversation that didn't go the way that I wanted it to go, instead of going back, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
It's business.
Yeah.
It's business. So, but that comes with age, I think.
Yeah.
It comes with confidence,
experience,
it comes with competence, all of that.
Well, it's funny because you just said that at the beginning of our conversation. When we were talking about imposter syndrome, you were saying all these voices,
right?
But you didn't say it in those words, but I'm going to mind my own business.
Right, yeah.
So you actually said that a few minutes ago, that's the narrative you replaced it with.
Right.
Which is interesting because for you, that was like coming from your childhood, right? So that was like an earlier seed that was probably even more rooted in a really great way, right? As opposed to what you got later in life at UCSD.
Right. No, exactly. No, that's really interesting. See, this is why you're the best at what you do, Winnie. So moving forward with people, and I want to talk about leadership in a minute.
Yeah.
We talk about feeling compelled to check all of the boxes before we move forward, especially as women. I've told the story. I think we did a podcast, a short on it, about how the men are willing to go out and apply for any job, whether they're qualified or not. But for whatever reason, women, I would ask my my female supervisors, hey, are you going to put in for that job?
Yep.
Well, I don't meet this qualification. One qualification out of all of them. So why, as women, do we do that, number one? And what do we need to do in order to stop doing that?
Yeah, I know. It's really a tricky situation. And I feel like, as women, first of all, I mean, honestly, we just have a lot going on. And honestly, I've been thinking about this a lot. It's like we don't actually have time to focus and go deep, traditionally like men do. I mean, again, this is like a gross exaggeration, right? Or generalization. But, sometimes men do have like the time and the energy and whatever, because they're not balancing like a whole bunch of other things as much to go deeper. So I think it might be like kind of going back to what we were saying a second ago is comparison. It's like, well, you have this deep expertise that like you can draw a straight line from dot to dot. When I went from being a consultant to a manager at Arthur Andersen, so it was only a year that I got promoted to consultant to manager. And the reason is because when they promoted me, when they gave me the job consultant, they brought me in as a first-year consultant, even though I was like 27, because I was a social worker before, right? Yeah. And then I was like a training coordinator within, behind the scenes, right? And after that first year, the partner said to me, he said, "I didn't know you'd be this good, and so we're promoting you to manager." Wow. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. The reason I'm saying that is because when I went to and Terry Hill, who was my manager at the time, I love her. Thank you, Terry. She basically went to bat for me during the session that they have when they're going to promote you. And you know what I did? I put together a spreadsheet linking the things I did as a social worker and how they linked and they were relevant as a change management consultant. Wow. So I basically said all that experience as a social worker is relevant for this job. So so I guess what I'm saying is for women, sometimes you're connecting the dots like this. Right. Where men are sometimes connecting the dots linearly. Right. You know what I'm saying? Right. And so you kind of have to be bold to say, the work I did as a social worker counts like working with CEOs. Like, who does that? Right. But you know what I mean? I think that's part of it is like seeing your life and your experience more holistically rather than within a box. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because we don't need to be in a box. And especially nowadays, men and women, we're seeing our lives so much more holistically and bigger. Yeah. And I think that plays to women's strengths. Right. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think we need to really appreciate and recognize our skills.
Yes.
When I got into the FBI, I thought the reason why I got into the FBI was because I did 6 years in the Army. I was a counterintelligence agent. I lived in Europe. I did all of these things. And then only to find out that the reason why they hired me was because I had good judgment. I had problem-solving skills. Yep. I could talk to people, So really, that again, with the stories as to why we do the things that we do. So when it comes to like checking those boxes, how important is your experience versus the skills that you have?
I mean, I have like a really like very simple example. So my oldest daughter, who's 21, 2 years ago, she started working at a restaurant around the corner. Great family restaurant. It's so lovely. They're amazing. Like the chefs are married and like the cousin runs the restaurant. And I asked them, like when we were at dinner one night, "Hey, do you have a job? My daughter's coming home from college. Do you think you have a job?" "Oh yeah, bring her over." And so she went, and literally the second day she was there, Tomas, the manager, he was like, you can run the place. Like you're in charge." Like he literally left and said, "You're in charge." And he said to her, "You have common sense. You jump in and do stuff. You don't wait for someone to tell you what to do. You just do it." And it's like exactly that. She didn't have restaurant experience. She didn't have experience like waiting. She had no experience, nothing. Yeah. And it's like, here it was, the common sense and like doing stuff and not being told what to do is what won him over. Right. So I think you're right. It's like, and I guess, behind that though is confidence, right? Because if you're waiting for someone to tell you what to do, or you have the common sense, but you're not willing to like execute it and do something, that in and of itself can hold you back. Right. So it's like thinking almost like, understanding your instincts are good. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you don't need, the higher you go, you just need to be a good leader.
Yes.
And I'm not going to say there are so few great leaders out there. People who empower their people who have that, instill that loyalty. And so that's what I think is interesting is that, when you're not checking all the boxes, who cares? If you're a good leader, you can write your own check.
Oh, 100%. Well, it's interesting you say that too, because I'm actually in a future podcast episode, I'm going to be working with a professor. He works with MBAs actually here in California, but also at our Carnegie Mellon University at their MBA program. And he actually asked people to do extra credit. And so they responded to the question something like, what have you learned during this program? And he teaches actually change management and that kind of thing. But through your MBA program, what's changed? How has your thinking about leadership evolved? Mm-hmm. And what's interesting based on the answers is that their first initial kind of experience or assumptions around leadership were kind of command and control, being the expert, knowing what to do, right? And those things can be good. Like, it's not to say that those things are good. But later on, they realized was what really good leadership looked like was being able to mobilize people, being able to instill loyalty, right? Being able to be in situations where you could lead people through difficult things, which, all depended on relationships and good communication, right? So it's interesting you say that because that's been their experience.
Right. So you coach these people, you help these people, and these are the highest level people, the CEOs.
Yep.
So what are you seeing across the board with these CEOs? I mean, what skills do they have that make them great? And what skills are they missing that we need to be working on now? So when we're at that level, then we're going to be able to be super successful.
Yeah. So first, I'd say a couple of things, and this kind of goes back to something you were saying a second ago, which is that a lot of the reason that you don't see so many great leaders is people aren't trained to be good leaders. And that's where I come in because that's where I make my living, right, is developing leaders. But, it's not natural. Like, most companies aren't investing a lot of money into good leadership program early on. Right? So you're just thrown into, kind of the river of like leadership, right? Because you did a really good job being an individual contributor over here.
Yeah.
Well, just because I was a good individual contributor over here doesn't mean I can lead people. It's a totally different skill set.
Yeah.
Right? So I think in some ways, one of the errors of corporate America is that we assume you were good here, that translates into good leadership. Good leadership takes really good skills, right? So I would say that for sure.
Right.
But the other thing is that what I would say that makes a good leader, that makes all the difference, and they go together, is this. And this is not, most leaders don't do this, and it's hard to do. Be aware of your blind spots. And in order to be aware of your blind spots, ask for feedback. Leaders don't ask for feedback. And no one's giving them feedback. Barely if they're asked. But it's definitely if they're not asked, right?
Yeah.
Because who wants to give feedback to their CEO or to their manager or to whoever, right? It's very difficult. It's on you to lead the way, to ask again and again, share potentially some blind spots that you think you might have or feedback that you want to kind of create a sense of safety, right? This is the thing. I mean, this is the thing that any leader can do that can make all the difference in the world. And any leader can do it, CEO down to first-time leader.
Yeah. I always tell new people who come on with me, the last thing I say is the Empress does not like to walk around with no clothes. So if ever I am walking around with no clothes, you had better step in and and I am as serious as a heart attack. And
That's right.
And I say that to every person who comes in and, every FBI squad supervisor, all of them, because they know that if I'm making a fool out of myself, they better stop me.
That's right.
But I think with that comes vulnerability.
Yes.
And as a leader, I'm saying that, look, I'm not always perfect. So there are going to be times when I'm going to look like an idiot, and I need you to step in and and I'll do the same thing for you.
Yeah.
But that takes a relationship, and that takes vulnerability. And is that the reason why that people aren't making that connection? Is because they're not willing to show that vulnerability?
Yeah, I mean, when you become, especially at the top of your game, as a CEO or whatever role you're in, and you're really high up there, sometimes it comes with a lot of ego.
Yeah.
Right? Which isn't bad. Ego can be totally healthy and fine, right? But, it can get us in a lot of trouble too when we don't say we're human and there's always something. And the thing is, the other thing that's really important too is that at every level in your career, as you grow and as you evolve and change, your blind spots become new. Right? It's not like, I knocked that out in my 20s. Now I'm good. I know what my blind spots are, done.
Yeah.
There's no checking the box.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? You have to keep evolving. And, depending on the role, your boss, the board you have to work with, the industry you're in, the economy, right? There's so many things and there's so many areas for pressure testing, you know what I mean, around leadership that, understanding what those blind spots are at any moment. And really, what I'm talking about, Gina, is creating a system and a process. I'm not talking about the one-off stuff. I'm talking about what kind of process and system do you have in terms of the relationships that you have with your clients, your direct reports, your peers, the board, right? So that it's not feels like a one-off or you're searching for it when you think you need it.
Right.
Right? What's the process and system that you've got in place that then you're getting a trickle of it a little bit at a time,
So what does that look like?
Yeah.
So say we're not a CEO yet. We're rising we're rising to the top with a bullet. So what does that look like and what type of blind spots are you talking about?
Yeah, good. Yeah, so a couple things. What's nice usually about corporate organizations, and this doesn't always happen, so you might have to create it yourself. Usually there's built-in checkpoints, right? So what I mean is when you're meeting with your director, okay, and first of all, let me take a step back. Especially like you just described, I'm an emerging leader. I've just gotten promoted. This is maybe my first or second promotion as a really official leader. I'm going to be wanting to get feedback from my direct reports, from my peers, from my boss, and maybe even a senior stakeholder out there, right? Who I don't have maybe a really close relationship with, but they're an important person in the organization and I want to get closer to them. How can I get some feedback from them, right? Okay, so I'm talking about the 360.
Right,
okay?
Right.
So that's important to know.
And then tell us what a 360 is.
Yeah, so a 360. So a 360 is literally getting feedback from everyone around you, as I just described. So your direct reports, your peers, your boss. Yeah, so that, which is different. So I'm not even talking about that yet.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is, you should, as a leader, be meeting with your direct reports, I'd say at least twice a month, really every week, especially if you're new and they're new and whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's built in.
Yeah.
You're meeting with them. Now, how are you going to spend that time? Are you going to spend that time talking about the newest project? You might, and you might need to, but are you carving out time to say, hey, I would like to do some exchanging of feedback for the both of us, right? And that's built in. Because you know what happens, Gina? Then if my boss is asking me every single week for feedback, at some point the safety is going to be there, right? Especially depending on how I ask, and there's a lot of stuff around that we could talk about.
Yeah.
But the consistency, he keeps asking me what I think.
Yeah.
I better be prepared at some point, right, to give him some feedback, right?
Right.
So that's direct reports. That's an example, right? So that's just a built-in, no one questions that we're meeting, right, whatever.
Right.
Peers, it's a little trickier, okay, because you're not usually giving peer-to-peer feedback, right? But think about what you do, think about your organization and who you most depend on to get work done. Pick one or two of those people and say to that person, I would really love to get feedback from you. I'd be happy to give it to you as well. I'd love to figure out how do we exchange feedback going forward because the work that we do overlaps, right? And I think it'd be really beneficial for us personally as leaders, but also for the business, for us to kind of talk about how we can help each other get better. That opens the door, right? And then you say, let's talk and intentionally have this kind of conversation. Maybe it's once a month, right? And then again, it's a system. For your boss, same kind of thing, right? So you're meeting with your boss, and if they don't make an appointment, you do it.
Yeah.
Your boss will thank you, right? Don't be intimidated to think, I'm just gonna bug him until... Say to that person, listen, can I schedule once every other week meetings with you? So, because I'd love to get feedback from you, and I'll send it to you ahead of time. Some questions, and then you can be prepared to give me some feedback. Take ownership.
Yeah.
One of the classes that I teach on feedback is, and one of the concepts that I teach in the program is, you have 100% ownership of your career and of you getting feedback. You can't wait for anyone else, right? You can't wait. And then I'll say one more thing about that senior leader. Seek out that person. Maybe it's saying, hey, I'd love to just know more about what you do, how you got to your, kind of you don't even have to call it a mentor because that might be too much, right? But just say, I'd really love to meet with you once a quarter.
Right.
And just hear from you about the business. I'd love to get feedback from you as appropriate, as you kind of see or even hear.
Right.
So that's kind of what I'm thinking about in terms of process.
Right. And then what do you do with that information?
Yeah, good question.
I
love that.
For someone who doesn't take criticism well, I have learned this. In fact, I learned that in a 360 that I have a little, I'm fine. I'm really good at other things. Taking criticism, I think I need to work on.
Yeah.
But what do you do with that information? And how do you not insert one of those stories in your head? Well, they don't like me, or how do you take it for what it is?
No, great question. So a couple things. First of all, this is where it comes to owning your career, is really taking ownership of how you're documenting and what you're doing with that information, right? Mm-hmm. I'll come back to that in a minute. You are collecting data. That's what you're doing, right? Collecting data and having that kind of mindset around this, or mindset around feedback, is helpful for a couple of reasons. One is it gives you some distance, right? This is just data that I'm collecting. It's also data that you're not always going to apply to all of it to you all the time.
Right, yeah.
Right? So when you collect data, you look at it and you think, what's relevant? Where are the patterns? What do I need to pay attention to? So for example, if you get feedback from someone and it's your boss, no one has ever given you feedback like that before, should you pay attention to it? Yeah, you should. And maybe you're going to want to change that one thing in terms of how you talk with your boss about it like that, right? But everybody else doesn't mind if you do that thing. Continue to do it. It's fine. Right. But for your boss, you better change it. Right? So it's really, you have to be wise, and you have to think about it as data.
Right.
Okay, now let me follow back on the other question, right? Which is, what do you do with it, right? There's lots of different ways. There's lots of different things. So you kind of have to figure this out for yourself. But take a spreadsheet, right? You've got like a tab, right? You can create and I'm like, I don't know, this is like the way I think, I guess. But start keeping track of the people that give you feedback and just literally write it in there, paraphrase.
Yeah.
And track it. That is such a gift to yourself, right? Because you can look back at it.
Right.
While you're at it, keep track of the accomplishments and the things that you're doing, right? Because at the end of the year, you'll thank yourself because you will have already written your whole annual review for yourself, right? And you can advocate for yourself in such a smart, educated way because you have all that data, right? So again, you own your career. Don't rely on the HR processes. Don't rely on your boss. Don't rely on all the people that, say that they're going to there's, we all have these forms. No, do it yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. So as you speak with people,
yes,
what are the blind spots we should be paying attention to?
Yeah. Well, there's always the blind spots with the blind spots,
Yeah. Oh my God. Let's start with the easy
I know,
blind
then you go in a circle, right? I think some of the blind spots actually are in our strengths. So we're all good at something. And what happens when it becomes a weakness is we either over-index on it or we apply our strength in a situation that's not appropriate. And so I think awareness around our strengths and awareness for what's called for in the moment is extremely important, because you can't get kind of lazy and kind of rely on your strengths in every situation. And sometimes you might have to show up differently where you're not always as comfortable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's what's called for in the moment.
Right. But give us an example of that.
Yeah. So a strength might be, that I am a really good public speaker, right? And I'm really, I come to the table really confident with a lot of good ideas. Okay. That's excellent. That's excellent for anyone, but especially for a leader who's trying to lead, maybe like a tech company and is extremely innovative, right? And all that. Where that can become a weakness is, first of all, if you're scaling an organization, right? And then all of a sudden you go from needing to do everything to actually needing to do something a little bit more niche, right? Because you've actually got people and hired an amazing team and all that. Now you need to let go of some of that, right? But that's a little bit different.
Right.
But if you're holding on to always having the great ideas, always being the person who speaks first and is able to command the room, you're actually holding your people back. The talented team that you've hired, they're now being, squashed or squandered, right, by you. So you have to be aware of, wow, I had this strength at this stage of the company. I could show up like this and use my strengths like this. Now I got to move that over and bring my strengths over here. And I have to do something that I'm not as comfortable doing, which is shutting up
and listening.
and listening and bringing people in.
Yeah.
Bringing people into the conversation, bringing them into the story, right? Where I'm usually creating the story, right? So, but if you have your eye on the North Star, which is I want to create an amazing business, I want to grow my product, right, or whatever it is, then you have to figure out where are my strengths and where are my strengths appropriately fit in, so that North Star gets accomplished. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And as leaders, how do we get the best out of our people?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's because what you're talking about is I have to change how I do business if I want to get the best out of my people, if I want to make them comfortable to give me their ideas instead of me giving them my ideas and everybody agreeing with it.
Yes. So the number one thing that you need to do to be a good leader and leading people is building really good relationships with those people. Now, I know that sounds obvious. It's not. Not everyone does it. And by the way, you might not always totally like everybody on your team. And in fact, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's even good. You know why? Because those people are bringing different skill sets to the table than you, and they're different than you, which means you probably have a well-balanced team that's going to help you be more innovative and creative than if you had a team that was more homogeneous, right? So, but that's something to remember. Like, I'm actually going to maybe hire someone that I don't love, like I wouldn't like want to go have a beer with. But you know what? I'm hiring them for a specific task, and I've got to kind of respect and trust them. And I've got to develop a relationship and understand where they're coming from, how they think, and respect that, and figure out how they fit into the bigger puzzle of the larger team and what we're trying to accomplish. Right? So though that, I think, is like the number one thing. Get to know your people, understand where their strengths are and how they all fit.
Yeah. And taking the time with your people.
100%.
And understand what their pain points are.
Yes.
And what motivates them and what leadership style they need.
Yes.
And when I do my public speaking, I talk about your leadership style is not going to be the same throughout your entire career. I mean, I, in the beginning, was a lead from the front leader because that's what I learned from my male mentors, how to lead from the front. But it wasn't until I became a servant leader where I couldn't lead from the front because I didn't have the expertise that I really was leading authentically. So I think it's really important to understand, and even within your team, you may have to lead in different ways in order to get the best out of your people.
No, you couldn't have said it better. And in fact, that's one of the workshops and sessions that I do is situational leadership, right? And not situational leadership, specifically, but kind of thinking about what does that person need from me for them to do their best work? That's really the question you should be asking. For every single person on your team, what does that person need from me, from their colleagues, and from our culture, a culture of our team, to do their best work? So, for example, you might have someone who is saying, like, I actually want to try something new and I'm ready to do this. And you're thinking, yeah, I think you are. Go ahead and try that. You've never done it before. Like we were talking about, you've never done it before, but try it, do it, right? Experiment. You might have somebody who you think they're ready and they don't think they're ready. And you're like, no, you are ready, right? I'm going to push you a little bit. I'm going to challenge you because I think you're ready. You need to just kind of take some risks and step out. You might also have someone who wants to take some risks and step out. They're not ready. You're thinking, no, you actually need some more training. You need to observe some more, right? So you need to kind of gauge, right, what your people need, even though they may think they need something else. You know what I mean? And kind of manage that.
Yeah, and the only way you can do that is to know your people.
Exactly. But you brought something up that I want to come back to, which is really important, is spending time. So kind of going back to this idea of you're the individual contributor, and certainly now you can be a leader, right? As an individual contributor, what's happening is you are immediately getting credit for the work you do. You can show it. Like, I did this work, good job, A+, right? When you're a leader, you are kind of like an IKEA peg in the furniture. We can't see you, and maybe we shouldn't, right? Because you're leading from behind, right? As you were describing, right? And what it takes to do that is to spend time with your people. You're not necessarily getting credit for that. You've got to carve it out. Right? And of course, you're doing other stuff too. Like, you're not just doing that. But that's an important, critical part, is spending time talking, getting to know like them beyond work too. I mean, not that you have to know all about their personal life, know something, right? Know something about where they're coming from.
Yeah, that is really important because I think we've all had those leaders who could care less.
That's right.
All they want to do is shine. All they want to do is take all of the credit. And all of the people that work for those people, they get it.
Yeah.
And there's no respect there. So really, that leader isn't getting an empowered group of people who are going to make him or her look great.
That's right.
They're going to do the least they can do because they have so much resentment towards the person who wants to be in the limelight.
That's right.
So
exactly.
I think it's so important for us to recognize that, okay, if my number one goal is to be the CEO someday and I'm going to do all of this, you're not going to make it based on you. You're going to make it by the people who you bring up.
100%. And, especially the more senior you get, you really become a leader of leaders.
Yeah.
So that's tricky. That's a whole nother kind of leadership skill, right?
Yeah.
So if you're leading individual contributors, that's a very different leadership skill, leading leaders, right?
Yeah.
Because now what you're looking at the enterprise impact, right? Rather than the departmental impact or the silo kind of impact.
Yeah.
So you really have to, and I always, when I'm working with executives, I'm always encouraging them to think like that before they're even there, right? Think about the enterprise. Don't, because it's so easy because that's how you grew up, is thinking about kind of what's in front of you and right here versus like, how am I thinking about the larger organization and who can I be thinking about that can help me think about this in a way that's not just right in front of me, right? There might be, again, those senior stakeholders that I can influence or that can actually mentor and help me think bigger.
Love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Making Maverick Moves, that's what we talk about here.
Yep.
So what do you tell your clients who are in the process of making that Maverick move?
Yeah.
Tell me a couple of characteristics that we need in order to be able to push through that fear, push through that confusion, that frustration, whatever it is that's holding us back, the intimidation, and jumping off that cliff like you did.
Yeah. The first thing that I say is you have a choice. You have choices. I mean, that's it. People don't believe they have choices. It's weird, Gina. It really is. Like I've literally talked to people who have gone to all the best schools, have all the awesome degrees, work at the top, private equity firm, and they feel stuck. And I'm like, it blows my mind. I'm like, you are so not stuck.
That's right.
You have so many choices in front of you. So the first thing is just helping people understand that they have choices and just get them to think about that, right? In connection with that, back to relationships, is actually really connecting and revitalizing their network, right? So many people, when they're thinking about making a maverick move, many times they've been doing something for a long time, or they've been at the same company, or they've been within the same industry, but they have other people, that they've been in contact with in the past, right? Or at other jobs. And so one of the things that I encourage people is just start talking to the people that you admire from your past or that you miss and that you'd love to have another conversation with.
Yeah.
Just start talking to those people and say to them, listen, I'm thinking about doing this or I'm considering doing that, right? And what happens is that you are planting seeds with people, right? Because people are like, oh, I had no idea. I actually thought that you were doing this thing and that you were loving it and that that's all you wanted to do. I didn't know you wanted to do this other thing. So suddenly, if you've planted 10 seeds with 10, powerful people in your network who are now aware that you want to do this other thing, and then you come back to them and say, hey, do you know anyone who does this? Boom. You're organically growing your network and talking to people. Suddenly, you've got confidence to think that you can do something.
Right.
So those are some of the steps that I kind of help people with and help them think about.
Yeah, no, that is great. And really, when you're planting those seeds and you're saying it out loud, that's coming back to you. And those are the stories that you start telling. I mean, the stories that you're telling other people are going to stay with you. So, I mean, it's so important. I'm a big believer in planting seeds. And I'll have this crazy idea, and then I'll go to the person and tell them about it, and then all I'm doing is planting a seed. I'm not asking for anyone to tell me anything else. I'm just planting that seed because you never know what's going to grow out of those seeds.
Well, and you're saying something really smart, Gina, which is you're planting seeds with someone else, but you're actually planting seeds with yourself. Right?
Sure.
Because Kelly and I were just talking about this, because what's happening is that when you say it, back to story.
Yeah.
You're believing it.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, and you're refining it. Because the more you talk about it, now sometimes you can get in a situation where you're talking a lot and you're not doing anything.
Right.
That's a different problem, right?
Right.
But I think for many people, it's really believing that it's a possibility, and then when you start to move in that direction, maybe that possibility, that goal that you had in mind, it might change and evolve, but that's not the point. The point is that you're moving and it's starting to get crystallized what that goal is. And that's what's exciting, is because you're moving in a direction. Thinking by yourself in a room by yourself is not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah.
But the more people you talk to and understand Gina, the world is changing so fast. Opportunities, they're coming and going, right? We've got AI and all that craziness, but there's a lot that's coming too that we don't even know, right? So I think just having that optimistic view that there is something out there, and I might not even know what it is, but I'll start here. That's, I think, part of the Maverick move too. It's like being a Maverick doesn't mean you've got it all figured out.
Right. But you hit on it. All you have to do is believe.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. You're in one situation, but you don't believe you're going to be able to do it, so you probably don't do it.
Yeah.
But think of another situation where you believed you can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that believing, and it seems like such a simple thing for you to believe, because you've created the idea. You've been innovative. You've been creative to come up with this brilliant idea of making this Maverick move to do all of these great things. But that belief is like a spark.
Yes.
That is what's going to put you over the edge.
And let's take it a step further, right? So you have to think about, and I think this is helpful, what's the worst case scenario? Because the worst case scenario is that you fail. When people learn and tell stories about what they learned and growing and anything that's of value, it's when they made a mistake.
Yeah.
You don't grow from being successful. You don't. Now, you grow from being successful and then having to do things you've never done before, right? That's different, right?
Yeah.
But you grow from making mistakes, right? So the worst case scenario is you believe you can do it, you do it, and you fail. You fall on your face.
Yeah.
But what are you going to learn from it? So I think that's important too, because that belief isn't fiction.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That belief is going to get you somewhere. You know what I mean? It may not get you where you thought it was going to get you, but it will get you somewhere valuable.
Yeah. And that's a great point with regard to making the mistakes. When I was an insecure leader, when I was like a squad supervisor, when I didn't know what I was doing and I wasn't that great, I didn't have the skill sets, I would never let my people make mistakes, because that would make me look bad.
Yes.
But then when I got comfortable as I went up the ranks, I would give advice, and if people chose to go down that rabbit hole, it's like, okay, if it's not going to hurt anybody, then let them make that mistake.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where people knew that I would do that, and I would say, well, wait, tell me more. They would want to know, because they wouldn't want to make the mistake. But that's what made them great.
Yes,
is because
that's right.
they had the courage to go into the rabbit hole
That's right.
in the beginning. So we have to, it is those mistakes, and failure isn't the worst option. Right?
Yeah. I mean, what's the worst option? Not doing anything.
Right. Oh, yes.
And staying stuck, right? And
Exactly.
just plateauing, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the worst. But that's where it comes to the courage that you've been talking about, right? And that's where the Maverick moves come from, because you have to have some kind of courage, right? To take that first step, knowing you might fail.
Yeah, for sure.
That really does take courage.
Do you have any tips on how to get unstuck?
So one thing that's interesting, I don't know if this answers your question, but I recently did a podcast on courage, and I came across this study, and the study was talking about actually trying to figure out, is courage located in your brain? Is there a courage location, in your brain? And there is. And the way they discovered it is they were putting people through an MRI, and in the MRI, there was literally a live snake taped to the back of you, but there was a mirror so you could see it.
Oh no! Oh, no.
And you had a lever. You had like a video game thing, and you could bring it closer and further away.
Oh my!
So you were in control,
right?
And so when they brought it closer, that took courage to maneuver it closer to you, right? And it was located in your brain. So I'm telling you this story because courage can be developed,
right?
Because our brains are neuroplastic, right? We have neuroplasticity in our brain. We can develop and learn we can learn to be courageous. Wow. And I think that's really encouraging because I think we think that courage, you either have it or you don't. Like you're either a Gina who like goes across the world and is like an FBI agent and like does all these awesome things, or you're not, right? And that's not true. You know what I mean? I mean, you may have like more courage and you've done these interesting things, but like that doesn't mean that you can't create courage. You can't flex that muscle.
Right.
You can, right? And I think that's really encouraging and exciting, right? For people to know that you can develop courage. This can be part of you. You might take it in baby steps, but that's okay, you know?
And like you said, it's that muscle and you got to flex that
Use
muscle
it.
if you want to make it strong. And how do you do that? By stepping outside of the box.
That's right. That's right.
And it could be little things. You can do it at your church. You could do it at work. You can do it in your neighborhood or wherever. But
that's right.
The more you flex that muscle, the bigger it's going to get.
That's right.
And then that's when you're able to jump off the cliff, right?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
sure.
No, you're right. It does get stronger and stronger because you might feel like I'm trying it, but it seems so small. But you're right. Well, the more you use it, the more it develops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll find yourself, it's like, you know what, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. Why? Because you've been flexing your muscle, you know, doing
over
the other
time.
things. Exactly.
Yes, that's
exactly.
right. That's right.
Well, I want to talk about your podcast,
Okay.
Transformative Leadership Conversations.
Yes.
So tell me about like the best guest that you've ever had.
Oh my gosh, the best guest I've
No,
ever had.
you don't have to pick one best guest because I know that was probably me.
Of course it was you.
In season 1. But maybe just tell us about the greatest lessons that we're going to learn by listening to your podcast.
Yeah. So what I love about my podcast is people always say like, what famous person do you want to have on your podcast? And I'm thinking, you know what? That's not an attraction for me. What I want to do is I want to amplify people's like stories that are amazing, that are everyday stories that no one else would necessarily hear if they didn't hear it on my podcast.
Yeah.
So I really love, because everybody, I mean, not everybody maybe, but so many people have amazing stories, right? I mean, you know this being a podcaster and doing what you've done, right? And so that's what I always want to get to is what's like your amazing story about what kind of leadership, accomplishment or, milestone or thing that you've overcome in your leadership journey. And I think what's also interesting, what I love to do on my podcast too, is like, because right now I'm doing different themes. And I'm really loving the themes because it's really bringing out people from all different places. So, for example, the theme this month is immigrant entrepreneurs, right? And so, especially with things that are going on in the world right now around immigrants, it's like, we really, the value that immigrants have brought to our country is like tremendous. And so I've got these amazing women, who are all immigrant entrepreneurs telling their stories.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what I love about the podcast is really talking to leaders and talking about different leadership themes that we have imposter syndrome as one of them, building trust, all those kinds of key leadership, characteristics that people want to develop as a leader. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about it with real leaders, not necessarily famous people.
Yeah. But I've been asked, who do I want on my podcast besides Winnie Da Silva? I would love to have Dolly Parton. Wouldn't you love to have Dolly Parton on your podcast?
I would love to have her. We had this conversation.
I know.
Dolly Parton is amazing, right?
I know, but when you look at the courage that she's had, and from the upbringing, one of like 12 children or something like that, and then, just to be really, really good at something and then to be able to give that goodness to the world the way that she has is just phenomenal.
And the other thing about Dolly Parton, honestly, is just she attracts everybody.
Yeah.
Like everybody loves her. Like it doesn't matter like who you are, where you come from, what your politics are. Like everyone loves Dolly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who does that?
Yeah.
Like that's hard to pull off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's something special about that.
Yeah. No, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. But I hear what you're saying. Okay, back to your podcast. Sorry. But so Dolly, if you're out there and you want to come on
We want to talk to you.
Winnie's pod, we can do it together.
We'll do it together.
It would be
I love
fantastic. But so what are you learning from these immigrant business owners?
Oh my gosh. I think what's interesting is that what they've been able to do, because when they come to this country as immigrants, they have to have resilience. They have to. They're taking risks. They're in the midst of ambiguity, right? And those are all the qualities that a good entrepreneur applies to building their business. So what I think gives them an edge is that they've done it by having to come to a new country, whether it's here or anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
Figuring out the stuff, figuring out like, how do I fit in? How do I acclimatize to the culture? When Anna Gudmundsson, who's one of my guests, who's actually coming out this Wednesday, she was talking about, and she's from Sweden, and she's had different companies in different countries, so not even just in the US. Now she's in LA. And she's saying, you know what I realize is that when I'm in a different country and I'm, acclimating to the culture, and I'm not even talking about the country at work, right? The culture at work in the country. I realize that once I've acclimated, I then step back and I think about, now who am I really? And I think that's really fascinating. And I think in some ways we all have to do that in corporate America especially. Kind of step back and say, but what's really me? You know what I mean? And think about that. But anyway, what I'm learning is just some of the things that they have to learn as immigrants to come to this country is so applicable to starting a company or being a great leader.
Right. I agree. I just had Wing Lam on the podcast. He is the founder with his brothers of Wahoo's Fish Tacos. And he talked about how the first 30 years of his life, he was trying to fit in. And then the last 30 years of his life, he's embracing how he's different. And that's what's brought him success. So that's
a perfect example.
It's such a great lesson because I think, or even me being a woman in a male-dominated field. I'm different, but what made me different made me better at my job. And that's how I was contributing, in such a powerful way.
And I think what's interesting about both of those examples is that there's strength in figuring out how you fit in too. You know what I mean? It's not like that's bad. You know what I mean? It's like we all have to figure out how to fit in on some level, right? And figure out how to make this work. How am I going to make it here? How am I going to fit in so I can be successful? That's a skill, right? And then when you've kind of created that skill or created that confidence or created those relationships, then you can also flex and say, okay, now I can kind of be more comfortable, right, in my own skin, or like think more clearly about who I really am, right? So anyway, I think both of those are good,
Okay, last question, because I can talk to you all day
I know, we really do like
Tell
that,
me the difference between a good leader.
Okay.
No. Tell me the difference between a great leader and a poor leader.
Okay. Oh, gosh. A great leader and a poor leader. I mean, really, it's just self-awareness.
Okay.
Yeah, self-awareness. Call that emotional intelligence. That probably captures it. Because leaders who are not good leaders are really just focused on themselves. They're not aware of their own emotional makeup, their own emotional reactions to things, internally and externally. They're not aware of other people's emotional reactions to things, how they're being triggered or whatever, how to maximize kind of the social network, and people, the people in front of the connections that you have. That's your downfall. Because really, Gina, when you think about it, hiring for competence is easy. Like you have the degree or you don't. You know how to program or you don't, right? You know how to write a good report or you don't. You can measure it. It's the tables. Those are all table stakes, right? Beyond that is really what people are looking for in a great leader is all that emotional intelligence stuff where you can read the room, you can be smart, you can do the things that we were talking about at the beginning in terms of working really hard and knowing how to bring people together.
You know what's so funny is when you were talking about feedback, asking your direct reports for feedback, how many times have we had people, leaders who have done that where they're just wanting you to give them compliments, right?
Exactly.
So I was thinking while you were talking about that, it's like, yeah, that's a good idea. However, if it's not genuine, then it is like, okay, we're going to do this again. I have to tell you how great you are. So you're right. It's that authenticity. It's that self-awareness, everything that you said. So when it comes to leadership, Winnie Da Silva knows what she's talking about. Winnie, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. This was so much fun. I can't wait till the next time we talk.
Making Maverick Moves with Gina Osborn is produced and edited by Zill Media. Connect with us on social media at GinaLosborn.com/Making Maverick Moves. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Making Maverick Moves wherever you get your podcasts.